now it is time to hear from our friend and colleague, Sandra from Riverbeach Primary School in Littlehampton in West Sussex. Riverbeach is a wonderful arts-rich primary school that we have the joy of working with regularly. And Sandra is in perhaps a luxurious position of being an art specialist at the school. But before she became the art specialist, Sandra taught in early years. And so creativity in early years is really at the heart of her being. So I'll pass over to you, Sandra, and let you tell us all about what happens at Riverbeach.
And now I'm really terrified. And also following you, Kirsty. Wow. Okay, so as Mandy said, I'm currently an art specialist teacher at Riverbeach, which is a 3-form entry primary school. It's quite a big one in a fairly challenging area. And we sort of feel the reason I'm the art specialist teacher is that we've really put arts and culture at the heart of a lot of what we do. But when Mandy asked me to do this, it really made me go back to where I began, in terms of working with children. It's not just as a teacher that I've been working in early years for a long time. From my background, like many early years teachers, I started in preschools and as a nursery nurse. And so creative processes, the process is such a lovely thing to hear. The process is important and it should be put at the center of everything, and that was such a lovely thing to hear. So what I do now in our school is teach everybody from early years to year 6, from reception to year 6. I don't currently teach any of the nursery children because their timetable runs slightly differently to ours, although I did do a day in nursery last year, which was wonderful. So normally I'm teaching everybody, and we have like a purpose-built studio, and for our early years children, they don't start off going into the studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. So yes, let's have a look. If we go through to the next slide. So what we do in early years, like many other settings, the environment is the most important part, and children have access to all sorts of things, and hopefully it's an engaging and enriching place to be for them. And we use tapestry, which I'm sure lots of other practitioners here use, but we find it helps us because we spend the day watching the children and taking photographs and recording the things that they say. So what I did was, in putting this presentation together, I wanted to showcase some of the incidences and things that the children do here, just to give you a flavour of what it's like at Riverbeach, really, in terms of our creativity in the early years. So I completely support and agree with everything that everybody said about how we should use the process, allow the children to express themselves in whichever way they want to. And what I really like about these photos is that hopefully you can see the speech that was going on when they were role playing in the slide previously. Sorry, yeah, and where the children were talking about things, and they brought their own experience to it, from home, any prior learning they've got, their own experience of owning a cat and a dog, and what they've learned about things like the vets. And what you need to know about this particular scene where the little girl's typing is that that role play corner is actually set up as a baby clinic. It's not a vet's at all. And what I loved was that went out the window, and they're playing their game, their ideas, and the picture of the girls outside, that's our climbing frame. And they just, I love the fact that by providing that environment with different objects and things like that, they go off and then they make up their own game. That's what early years is about. And being able to use sort of this way of working it, then we just listen to what they're saying, and then we can talk and we intervene and join in the conversation if that's necessary to extend their learning. And you all know this, you're all early years practitioners, you know all this stuff. So I just wanted to sort of share some instances. If you want to move on to the next screen, I just wanted to showcase some of the materials, really. So in each room. It's like the blue table, if you like, the creative table. There is an area where there are resources that they can access, all the resources that they want, really, you know, and we will put things out to give them a prompt, but they will interpret that in their own way, and they'll go and find other things, because the just sort of in the area where you can see the little boy painting, that's something that I took resources in for one of my lessons, because I have to sort of teach them an hour a week. But then prior to that, you know, or around that, they then turn around and access different paintbrushes from the trolley, different crayons, different bits of paper. So they're still accessing freely, even though I've sort of gone in there and I've sort of said, today we're learning how to hold a paintbrush or something, you know, or this is how you could hold a paintbrush, and this is how you could mix green, having established whether or not they can mix green, or if they think green's even important. So providing stimulus for them and then painting with them. The outside area, we've got lots of construction things. So I really like this enclosure that the children have made. There was lots of lovely cooperation going on there. And they were making up their own game, their own conversations. There was very little adult intervention in this particular thing. But I like the sort of the way they were working together. So we have a lot of materials like that at Riverbeach so that they can do that. This scenario, the girls had made a birthday cake. And they'd made a birthday cake. The discussion was about how many candles they wanted to put on the birthday cake. Parts of the resources in the sand tray are actually the candles. And then they sang happy birthday. I can't remember whose birthday it was. So moving on to the next slide. These are just some of the examples of things they've made, just with different resources that they can access. Some of these, so some of the drawings are things where I've sat with them and I've shown them something. So I suppose explicit teaching, and then the resources have been there and they go off and interpret that in their own way. So I just chose some examples where we've been talking about drawing people because they've been thinking about superheroes, and they've gone off and drawn their friends, their mum. This strange blue elephant is like a super elephant because they've been looking at superheroes. This child went off in their self-initiated time and drew this elephant with a superhero cape, and then did some writing, which was lovely. We've got different paintings that have been inspired by when they were learning about space, and the boys here have been doing their block play. They were having a really heated discussion, and I love the fact that this little boy sort of explained, he was being very emphatic with his friend about why he needed to use those particular blocks on the building, and his friend wasn't quite there with him. So we've got a nice example of the role play there. Moving on to the next one. These are some of the things that sort of towards the later part of the year, but just before, so in the summer term, we had a timetable where we began to introduce the children in reception to the art studio, because once they get to year one, they come into the art studio every week for a lesson. So I was teaching them once a week in their classrooms using their environment, and we started thinking about really specific things and giving them things to draw and different types of resources. So it was kind of an observational drawing lesson, and this was a very taught thing, which wasn't necessarily, so the creativity, I think, came from their choice of whether they were using pencils or crayons and paints, but the stimulus was I gave them beans to look at. But they'd been looking at real plants and growing their own plants and looking at stories and things like that beforehand. So this is kind of really schooly, I think. And it was part of teaching them a skill. So we were really looking. So what we did first, we didn't draw anything. We looked at the things and discussed the colours we could see, and we discussed the shapes of things we could see. Then I just let them draw if they wanted to. And they did. that then led on to, if we go to the next picture, they then start going into the studio. So by the summer term, they start coming into the studio, and they sort of, and it is a whole class environment. It's for an hour a week, and I show them specific things, give them lots of different materials, and they then go on and interpret that in their own way. It's not classic early years. It's like, I feel it's sort of like a transition. However, they seem to really enjoy coming into the studio. If you look on the doors in the background, there are all sorts of pictures that the early years children have made, and they tend to make them either in the studio, or they bring them to me when they've made them in their own classrooms, and they say, can you put this up in the studio? Because they know it exists, and it's part of the school where, so those of they know it's there because they see it when they walk past it. So when they come into it, they're quite excited to be there. And then they go back, and they do seem to really, really look forward to the times when they come into it. So I'm sort of really conscious that some of you might be thinking, oh no, that's not really early years sort of practice as such, but it's a nice sort of balance. I like the balance of them having that enjoyment, and it's a time where they have to be there. Like, they have a session where they go to the library, they have a session where they go to the computing lab, and it's a short, sharp burst. While they're in there, I'll teach them a skill and then give them resources, and they then interpret it in their own way. And what they're praised for, and what we record in terms of tapestry normally, is the process, how they've done it, what they've talked about, what they've said about it. And then as they move on into year one, they've got some experience of being there, so it's not quite such a sort of a culture shock when they come out of their early years environment to then go into the studio. And the last picture I just wanted to show you, this was a picture of little girl. So they had a superhero day, they dressed up, they were role-playing, as they've been role-playing as superheroes for a few weeks, but they had a day where everybody was dressed up, and this gave them a chance to have a bit of a party, really. They had sort of a really lovely day where they were, some of the costumes were sort of bought costumes, but they spent the day as they normally would, with going outside and playing, spending a lot of time outside, and they also got to go around the whole school. And we do sort of days like this where they're sort of immersed in stories, and this little girl was, as you can see, as Batgirl, but she drew this picture, and she just went off to the table and drew this picture with chalk, and she'd obviously seen lots of the stories where there are sort of cityscapes where superheroes are flying through the air, and she'd gone off and done her lovely picture of kind of a city, I think. And I just wanted to sort of finish on that. I don't know if that explains very well kind of how we do things at Riverbeach in the early years, but it is very much based on immersive experiences, providing the materials and enhancing their learning with conversations, recording what they say, watching what they do, and helping move them on in that way, which all good early years education is. And I hope you've enjoyed the pictures, if nothing else.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the screen as well.
Thank you very much, Sandra. That was wonderful. And I get a real sense of the developmental processes that you take the children through. But what also stands out is the quality of the work. It's really, really impressive. Thank you very much. And the photographs are beautiful.